Do you ever feel like you're stuck in a repetitive negative loop? Maybe it's your daily routine, maybe it's your job or career, or maybe it's your relationship or lack thereof. It could be that you feel alienated or lonely, like no one understands you, or that you've been fighting negative thoughts, habits, and addictions without success. Maybe you're attracting people and situations that consistently drain your energy, or you feel like life is passing you by as you remain uncertain about what it is that you should be doing. Whether you answered yes to some or all of these questions, you're definitely not alone. It's very common. What separates humanity from the rest of the animal kingdom is that we are not only focused on surviving, but also thriving. If we are being honest, we would admit that many of us, regardless of our conditions, do not believe we are achieving our highest potential. Yet, what does it mean to be thriving? Plenty of people have money, others have great relationships, some have both. Others are famous and idolized by millions for doing something that they love. Yet many of these people also feel discontent and emptiness. Is there a common link to these feelings, and can it be identified and neutralized? Based on my own struggles combined with my deep passion for psychology and philosophy, I've studied this dilemma for years, looking to develop on research and insight from several key influential figures that have positively impacted my life, working on these same difficult topics. I want to give a shout out to some of those people in particular, such as Sigmund Freud, Anna Freud, Carl Jung, Friedrich Nietzsche, Joseph Campbell, Stephen Cartman, and Brene Brown. They and many others have dedicated a great portion of their lives to researching and attempting to answer these very difficult questions. Their research serves as a roadmap for many, myself included. Combining some of their research with my own, I have created a model that serves to build upon the foundation they have laid. This model can be applied to and utilized by anyone, especially those who answered yes to those initial questions and are looking for a way out. I call my research the victim-hero-villain complex. Life is just a mirror, and what you see out there, you must first see inside of you. Wally Famous Amos. Throughout novels, movies, politics, religions, and mythologies dating back thousands of years, we have developed stories centralized on themes involving victim, hero, and villain characters. Humanity strongly relates and gravitates to these three characters and their stories of struggle and conflict. Likewise, many of us play out these roles in our everyday lives. Sometimes it is to overcome our greatest obstacles in order to step into a higher version of ourselves. Legendary examples of this are the resurrection of Jesus Christ and Martin Luther King Jr. with the Civil Rights Movement. Yet the real-life application of these three roles more commonly results in destruction. In 1968, Dr. Stephen Cartman developed the Cartman Drama Triangle, a human interaction model identifying destructive patterns that occur during conflict. Cartman observed three roles involved in these conflicts: a victim, a rescuer, and a persecutor. Sound familiar? In destructive conflict, one person plays the role of a victim. They are not truly a victim, but rather someone looking to avoid responsibility and blame. The victim blames someone or something for their circumstances, but claim they are unable to fix it themselves. Therefore, they unconsciously seek a persecutor that places blame onto them, further validating their own sense of victimhood. Likewise, they attract a rescuer to save them from their misfortune and from the persecutor. The victim is a central figure in these conflicts, but the rescuer and persecutor roles have their own hidden motives. A rescuer is not a true hero. They are saving others not from a place of sincerity, but rather as a way of avoiding their own issues and inability to control their own negative circumstances. Likewise, a persecutor criticizes others and hands out punishment not to establish justice and order, but instead to tear others down as a way of building themselves up. They mask their own feelings of inferiority behind their status as an all-knowing authoritarian, seeking out others who appear weak and mistake-prone. The real motives of each person are often unconscious and masked behind the false sense that they are doing the right thing. It's the others in the drama triangle that are in the wrong, and this is why the conflict becomes destructive and toxic. At the surface, each role in the conflict appears genuine. Underneath the surface lies insecurity, selfishness, greed, resentment, and feelings of inferiority. But what is it that makes us gravitate to conflict and struggle, be it within stories or our personal relationships? Well, it's simple. Oftentimes, what we gravitate to within others first exists within ourselves. Therefore, the origin of most of our conflicts reside within our own psyche. This is where my research comes into play. I propose that within each of us exists an inner victim, hero, and villain. I developed a diagram I've labeled the inner conflict triangle that represents the three roles within us. I believe that the external conflict displayed in Cartman's drama triangle is an extension of an even deeper issue, an inner conflict already existing within us. I changed the names of persecutor to villain and rescuer to hero because I find these terms more relatable. While connected, there are key differences that distinguish the inner conflict triangle from Cartman's drama triangle. As noted, Cartman's drama triangle focuses on conflict people have with each other. The inner conflict triangle focuses on the internal struggle and dialogue we unconsciously have within ourselves. This may or may not manifest in conflict with others. It's absolutely possible that the inner conflict may be isolated to someone having conflicting thoughts within themselves regarding a thing or circumstance that doesn't involve other people. For example, someone struggling with an addiction has a part of themselves that enjoys the pleasure too much to give it up, and they feel powerless to do so. Another part of them may feel ashamed and belittle themselves for not stopping. A third part of them may attempt to take steps towards stopping, only to end up succumbing to the part of themselves that enjoys the pleasure too much to give it up, thus enabling the cycle to continue. These three parts engage in a sort of cyclical inner conflict revolved around substance abuse. Another example would be someone who feels stuck in a career. A part of them wants to evolve and branch out into something new, while another part of them may fear change and prefer to remain in their comfort zone. A third part may criticize themselves for not already moving beyond their current occupation. In this example, the cyclical inner conflict revolves around the current occupation. These struggles play out like the destructive human interactions seen in Cartman's drama triangle, but they occur internally. We do not possess a full understanding of how to resolve the inner turmoil because most of the struggle occurs beyond our conscious awareness. Likewise, in Cartman's drama triangle, the victim is the central figure that attracts both the rescuer and persecutor to enable this drama to play out. In the inner conflict triangle, the villain is the central figure and is often the most unconscious. The inner hero and victim are extensions of our inner villain. They serve as surface defense mechanisms that rationalize our wrongdoings. Actions that others would deem selfish are justified by convincing ourselves we are innocent victims or that we are trying to help others. In other words, the victim and hero identities we display at the surface are designed to protect us from seeing anything we do as wrong because it reflects a part of ourselves we wish to avoid. This is known as shame, and it is the origin of our conflict. Shame corrodes the very part of us that believes we are capable of change. Brene Brown. Shame is the belief that a part of you is wrong. The first remnants of shame often develop in early childhood at a time we are more susceptible to internalizing the bad things we experience. For example, instead of saying, I made a mistake by doing something bad, we say, I am bad. If we experience physical or verbal abuse, we may think I am unlovable or I am worthless. Shame is very dangerous and debilitating. When we believe a part of ourselves is wrong, we are unable to escape it but want nothing to do with it. We try to hide it from ourselves and others. For example, if deep down I believe I am a bad person, I will try to hide from things that reinforce this belief. I may distract myself in daily pleasures, fantasies, and situations that put me in good standing. I may look for other people I believe are bad and gravitate to them. Then I can either play the hero and try to fix these people to feel better about myself, or I may provoke them to antagonize me so that I can play the victim. At the surface, this makes me feel like I'm a better person. Again, I remind you that this is unconscious. This is not something you are sitting around thinking about doing and then you do it. You do this instinctively without any deliberate thought, and you've done this for so long it has become as automatic as blinking or breathing. Do you believe you are above doing this? I believe everyone does this to an extent. Many of us do not have a problem admitting times we feel victimized at the expense of others in our life circumstances. Sometimes we really are victims, nor do we find difficulty pointing out flaws within others and showing them how they can be fixed. Sometimes criticism can be constructive, yet how many of us are openly willing to admit that times we become villainous, selfish, greedy, manipulative, envious, insecure, and judgmental of others? How many of us are willing to admit even our most innocent mistakes? Sure, in general, we may sometimes admit this and shrug it off with hopes of doing better in the future, but do most of us really admit to having an inner villain? Do we take serious time and effort to investigate its depths? If we really put the work in, we will see that we have been manipulating ourselves for a very long time with unsuccessful results. Yet I promise you that by putting the work in, while it is difficult, it's well worth it in the end. It's easy to see the parts of ourselves we want to see, but the way out of repeatedly experiencing negative thoughts, toxic relationships, addictions, feeling alienated, and feeling empty is to identify the darkest roots of our buried shame and how we have manipulated ourselves to avoid facing it. We then work on counter-conditioning these negative beliefs, emotions, and associated behaviors. This involves re-exposing the dark and sometimes traumatic origins of our shame without the barriers of our defense mechanisms. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Carl Jung. Why go through the effort of exposing our villainous nature and the underlying repressed thoughts, emotions, and trauma we have been avoiding for a lifetime? Isn't there an easier way to navigate life? Easier, yes, but it's much less authentic and fulfilling. When we are unaware of the defense mechanisms we use and what they mask within ourselves, we project the blame and responsibility outward. We unconsciously attract negativity and misfortune while consciously remaining outward focused. In other words, we cannot get out of our own way because we cannot see that we are in the way. We attract negativity, blame others for it, which, you guessed it, creates more negativity that we blame others for. Think about that. If we do not take responsibility for overcoming our misfortune, regardless of whether it is our fault, we deny it, avoid it, and attack anyone or anything that reflects it back to us. Eventually, it controls our life from an unconscious part of ourselves, like a puppet master pulling strings from behind a curtain. It becomes a crutch to attract more misfortune and destructive patterns that keep us stuck in a repetitive rut of negativity. The way out of this trap is to make the inner villain conscious. It serves as our most unconscious defense mechanism meant to mask the negative thoughts and emotions we have internalized. Maybe someone said or did something to us and we personalized it. Then we buried it out of shame and fear. The more negative thoughts, emotions, and experiences we internalize and then neglect, the more powerful, chaotic, and uncontrollable our inner villain becomes. Conversely, the more aware of these tactics we become, the less likely we will be controlled by them. In turn, we attract less negativity into our lives. But in order to make this inner villain conscious, we must understand its true nature and intent. Despite what predetermined thoughts and emotions arise when you consider that you have an inner villain, its origin was created with good intentions. It is our most unconscious defense mechanism designed to protect us. For example, imagine, if you will, a little child that is yelled at, cursed out, and scrutinized for putting his shirt on backwards. I use that example because it happened to me multiple times when I was around 3 or 4 years old. I dreaded putting my shirt on because I was not able to understand why I was doing it wrong, only that I upset that parent. I felt like I let that parent down, and I internalized the feeling of being a failure. That's what children do. Children do not understand human behavior and often internalize thoughts and emotions directed at them because they cannot see the bigger picture of what is really happening. Continuing with the t-shirt example, when I got older, I would avoid situations I could fail at. I didn't realize I was doing it, but looking back, I had a major fear of rejection. I would do things like avoid talking to any girls that I liked unless they first told me they liked me. I would only try something new if I were sure to succeed. I never asked people for help out of fear of being told no. Simultaneously, I attracted broken people into my life that I was always trying to fix. When I couldn't fix them, I would turn to belittling them and tearing them down, saying they were a lost cause, were taking advantage of my time, and were unappreciative of my help. The truth is I wanted to focus on their issues to avoid facing my own. But when I failed to fix them, My inner villain would arise and replace my hero role, and then it would lash out as a final defense mechanism to protect me from feeling like a failure. I rationalize my anger towards these people using the surface hero role. Other people do it with the surface victim role. This keeps the villain hidden from your awareness. The deepest truth for me is that I believed I was a failure, and my inner villain was still protecting that small child putting on his t shirt. The memories of me getting screamed at for putting my shirt on backwards only resurfaced when I began this journey involving the victim hero villain complex. Once I found myself upset at someone for not doing something that I told them to do, and I suddenly lashed out at them. Now that I am aware of these defense mechanisms and how they manipulate our thinking, I was able to trace my reaction back to that moment as a young child. That memory suddenly resurfaced, as did the internalized belief and feeling of being a failure. As an adult, I can see I was not a failure for being 3 or 4 years old and not understanding the tag goes on the back when you put a shirt on. That's silly. But as a toddler with an underdeveloped brain, I internalized that belief and then buried it within the depths of my unconscious so I would never have to face it again. Yet it never left, and once I understood this process, I could see how I was manipulating myself to avoid it. Upon this profound realization, the belief of being a failure vanished, and a heavy emotional burden was lifted. You do not often realize the mental and emotional weight you carry for a lifetime until it leaves you. I now attempt things containing a high degree of failure because the possibility of failing no longer controls me. This also grants me more opportunities to succeed. It's often the times we get the most upset and lash out at others that we can see our inner villain at work. This means an external trigger cuts deep, reflecting an aspect of inner shame we have buried. We either fight against it or we go to extreme measures to avoid that trigger in the future. But knowing the dynamics of the victim hero villain complex and the inner conflict triangle allows us to use these triggers as tools to expose and overcome this shame so we can step into a better and more authentic version of ourselves. Future videos will include specific steps on how to break the negative shame cycles we've been in for a lifetime. There will be relatable real-life examples showing you how this process works. My only goal is to present a way out, but I cannot do the work for you. This is a roadmap that anyone can use, but each individual journey will be unique to you and your own experiences. It's also never ending. It's up to you to decide if this is something you want to pursue. So be prepared to put a lot of time and effort into this. Prepare to feel vulnerable. Be honest with yourself, but do not beat yourself up too bad. You will eventually learn that we all make mistakes, and the perfect person you imagine others to be possesses insecurities similar to your own, whether they show it or not. If you really do the work, you will come to see that past mistakes and negative experiences do not define you, allowing you to evolve and step into a more authentic version of yourself. And if you get nothing else out of this, understand that you cannot avoid shame. You either become its servant or you rise above it. Until next time, keep growing.